I'd like to thank you first of all coming here, making the time, and I hope this will be a useful presentation. We made sure that it will be short, concise, and as boring as possible. So I'll hope you'll enjoy it. I would like to start with a question, and feel free to share your experiences. Have you been advised by anybody regarding your wills in Qatar, or what you have heard about wills in Qatar? Why do you need a will in Qatar? Anybody would please?
They need to be Sharia compliant. That's one of the things.
Okay.
I've heard that they have to be written in Arabic,
Okay.
even if they're from our home country.
Okay. Who needs a will is anybody who lives in the country. As long as they are subject to the jurisdiction of Qatar. It's not a requirement by law, you don't have to have it, but if you want, you can have it. Now, most of us all have bank accounts, or all of us actually. We own cars, and we have personal effects, cash, jewelry, whatever property that you have in your house. And let me stop there for a minute, and I'll give you a short story that actually happened that we dealt with, and it's regarding to cars. An employee passed away of one of the local companies, and he owned a car. And the family wanted to bury him back home. They weren't able to basically move the body out of Qatar because he had a car. And the traffic department asked the family to sell the car. Now, he's dead, he owns the car, and they are asked to sell the car. And his daughter was alive, and she wasn't able to sell the car because the laws does not allow somebody other than the owner to do it. And what happened is they've been asked to go back home, get a court decision that they are the legal heirs, and then come back to Qatar, enforce it through Qatar courts, and then sell the car, and they can take the body home. Now, under the laws of Qatar, we will look at two different parts. I can see some Qataris around here, and probably some Muslims. But when we make a distinction between locals and non-locals, it will include the Muslims who are not Qataris. Now, under our laws, for a local or Qatari, the law assumes that he's a Muslim. So it will be based on Sharia law, Sharia principles. And the way it's divided under Sharia principle, you are not allowed to devise more than 1/3 of your wealth, or write a will that will exceed more than 1/3 of your wealth, because it's already pre-decided and pre-allocated through the Sharia principles. Now, the way they will do it is that they will pay the debt, they will cover all expenses, and then whatever is left will be devised between the legal heirs, and then whatever is left, if 1/3 was left, that will be devised as per the will. Now, the big question is for non-locals. What do you think? Who would have an idea? What happens in a non-local? Nobody would want to take a guess? Okay, it's sort of close to that. Well, there are two main things. If a non-local passes away, there are issues of guardianship if he has kids in the country, and issues around inheritance. Now, the laws of the country does not impose Sharia principle on non-locals, even if they are Muslims. The laws of your home country, or to be specific, the nationality that you hold will apply regarding guardianship or inheritance. So you don't have to worry about Islamic principles applying to you. Now, this is a a graph that we've done, it shows you the differences when somebody passes away. If you see, it's based on nationality between Qataris and non-Qataris. Now, for the Qataris, as we explained, they can't devise more than 1/3 of their will. If they pass away without a will, the will still be distributed or devised pursuant to the Islamic principles and percentages set up in Islamic laws. For what we will focus on is the non-Qataris, because it's a bit complex. Now, even though your nationality, your laws of your nationality will apply, the trick will be between passing away with a will and without a will. And we will go through that, and we'll show you now what happens if somebody passes away without a will, what happens to his inheritance in the country. Now, this is the process. Before talking to the process, Qatar laws doesn't have specific requirements for a will to be enforceable, unlike the US and New York. And Sean here is a qualified lawyer in New York. He feel free to ask him any questions on later on. There's no requirements other than it needs to be in writing and signed. Now, this is what happens basically when somebody passes away. The heirs will have to go back home without a will, passing away without a will. You'll have to go back home, get a decision from the court, deciding and specifying who are the heirs legally, and what is the percentages of each one of them. And you will need a copy of the legislation based on which the court issued the decision. Now, in common law system, this might be a problem because the law is not always written in a legislation. It's made by court decisions. And then all of these documents will need to be attested in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of your home country, and then Qatar Embassy, and then coming back to Qatar in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then submitted to the court. After that, the court will look into these documents and issue a decision. The decision the court will issue will need to go through enforcement. We will get to. Before that, if a person owns a property that needs management, the court has the right to appoint an administrator to manage that until they make a decision. So, if the court made a decision, it will move to the enforcement phase, which is a different court. You will have to apply and start through that enforcing or executing the court decision. And then the distribution of the estate will happen. So the way I explain it, it might be, it's long. It's not might be, it's very long. It's difficult. The family would go through legal complications to start, and probably to be able only to move back the body and bury the body back home. Now, what we tried to do throughout our experience is to build a will that will overcome this long process. What you said, it needs to be in Arabic, that's absolutely true. And what we've done and what we've developed is that we draft the will in a dual language, because eventually a non-local would assuming that they speak English, they would want it to be in English. And to ensure that it will not be subject to interpretation because of the translation, we do it in dual language and ensure it's inconsistent with the English. Then what we do, we attach to the will the piece of legislation that is related to, from the home country, that is related to the will. We get it attested, so it's already there, ready. You don't have to do it again, or your family doesn't have to do it later on. And then in the will, you can appoint the guardian, or administrator, or executor of your will. And the court, as long as the laws of your country allows you to do that. And finally, we get it witnessed by 2 witnesses, in addition to the lawyers signing it, witnessing it, and then basically attested in the Ministry of Justice. Now, the reason it's done in the Ministry of Justice is that the court will not dispute. Nobody can dispute that the execution of a document was illegal. So it cuts back some of the processes that you have to go through. With that, you can apply to the court. The court will have the documents it needs, and based on that, they will issue a decision. Sure.
Does the executor have to be in the country here?
No. Even the guardian. You can appoint anyone, anybody, and to be specific, we've done it in the past, and we usually use their passport numbers and their official information, so there will not be confusion. The only problem that might happen is that if that person changed their name or the information changed, but usually not. Lots of people have their guardians and executors are out of Qatar. Well, basically, they are family members.
So can I have just one question?
Sure.
So just from a practical perspective, if you have 33 nationalities, when you get visa on arrival, how would an executor travel the country? I mean, can these documents be used to get a visa?
Well, to be frank, I don't have a specific answer to that. We haven't experienced that. But I would say probably yes. If to go to the court, he will need to appoint a lawyer. So if he appoints a lawyer, the lawyer would be able to go through that process. He doesn't have to be himself there. And there are many ways to get a visit visa through law firms or business trips. But to be specific, I don't have the answer for that. It's not in the law. It's a process where the Ministry of Interior manage.
Can you give us sample times of with will and without will, the processing, how long it takes?
How long? To be precise, I have no idea, because so far it hasn't been tested what we've done. But from my experience, the court process takes some time. See, the court, it operates this way. They have 3 months holiday. They don't work. And so when you have a court case, and
the same months every year, or is it like specific like?
They're the same. It's a very rigorous process. The judicial year starts from I think it starts in November or something, and between July, August, and September, and sometimes October, you will find limited cases in the court. So what happens is the process starts. If it comes to close to the judicial recession, then it will be pushed 3 months. So the court system, maybe unlike some jurisdictions, you would find the hearings are happening every 2 weeks, sometimes every 2 months, depending on how the judge or the court is pressured with work. So it might take a judicial year, which is what we call 1 year. It might take less. Without that process, it depends. We had a case where it wasn't a will case. It was a family issue, where the court asked both parties to go back home, get a copy of the laws, and point out the relevant sections where it will allow Catholics to get divorced. The judge, for some reason, said, well, I know Catholics are not allowed to get a divorce, so we cannot give a divorce. And the thing is, family issues, will issues are, for locals, they go to the family court. But for non-locals, including the Arabs, it goes to civil court. So the judge who's looking at it, he's a civil judge. He's not a family trained judge. So the process from going back, and if we go back to this slide, it will show you, you will have to go through this process to be able to get a decision eventually. Because judges are being instructed by the law that you cannot apply Qatar law. So you have to apply their hometown laws. They don't have a copy of that, and they will never look for it. So what they will do, they will ask you to go and get a certified copy that this is the law. In some jurisdictions, the laws are not detailed to every issue that you will face. So then you go and get a legal opinion, and then the court will dispute that legal opinion that this is not a judge, this is a lawyer, I don't have to take it. And then they'll ask you to go to a court and get a decision from the court. So all of these complications might prolong the period of the execution of the will. Yes?
What happens, something like that, the husband and wife are two different nationalities, or you carry dual citizenship? Does this just add another?
Yeah, well, exactly. No, actually what happens in this case is it depends on who passed away. So the laws of the person who passed away will apply. That question will be relevant if it was a custody issue in a divorce, where then you will have a real problem.
Like I'm thinking, if my husband and I were both to die, who gets some kids, and where do I need to have them?
Well, if somebody passes away interstate, meaning without a will, and they are not locals, what happens? And we had a case where a family, parents passed away, and they had a minor, a kid, and the embassy got involved. The government stepped in, communicated with the embassy, and said, "Please communicate with the family. Let them come and pick up the kid." What happens for Qataris? If I pass away, there is an authority for minors. If he's a minor, my wealth will be managed. If based on Islamic law, if he was a boy, my wealth will be managed by the minor authority. Nobody can use anything, do anything without their approval. But still, the custody will be with my wife. Now, going back to this process, and as we've been discussing before, this process, we've developed that because we've done a workshop for another group. And we realized that there are so many issues people are facing we never thought about. And we've developed that process. It has not been tested yet. But what we tried to do is to make sure that we are eliminating whatever process that will prolong the hearings in the court. Now, what are the benefits? Basically, the benefits are to do whatever you want, so long as your laws allow it. I know in New York, if you have a will, they will follow your will, and will be distributed as per that will. So you can appoint somebody to manage your assets. You can appoint a guardian. It will help you basically timely managing the court process, trying to eliminate whatever process will prolong the litigation. And to be honest, sometimes most of the judges are civil trained lawyers. There is a difficulty for them to understand a different concept if they don't know about it. In a common law system, court cases are binding, precedence is binding, unlike a civil system. So sometimes there will be confusion between whatever the system is in your home country and an understanding of a judge. We had an experience with a judge where he basically tried to apply whatever he knows in terms of law and Islamic principles, because we weren't able to give him a piece of legislation that was issued. And in that jurisdiction specifically, they didn't have, the legislation was 3-page law that doesn't explain much. And in that case, it was a very difficult case, and eventually the judge accepted the position, but after a very long time. So this will help you overpass that complication. And again, you can appoint a trustee of your choice. Now, with that, in having a will, it will give you all of these elements. I wouldn't say for sure it will be enforced without any resistance or complication, but the court behavior, they do not get involved in a non-local inheritance issue. They would specifically ask you to provide the pieces of legislation that related to that, and they will follow it. So as much as there are issues around it, as much as they don't prefer to step in and decide on behalf of a person who is not a Qatar, and the local laws does not apply to that.
I mean, the vast majority of our assets are in the United States, and so obviously the will would cover those assets.
Yeah.
But for, we, like others, we have cars here, we have personal effects, we have, a bank account with some small amount of money. Would we need to do anything with those wills to make sure to expedite the process?
What would I advise you is get them in Arabic, attest them in Qatar, and keep them with you. It will help you expedite the process, because your will back home is done differently. A lawyer, you're there and you sign it, witnessed, and pretty much that's it. And then it will be presented to the court and will be done. But in Qatar, the complexity is that they will need to know that this is actually your will, and to know that they will ask whomever is taking over that process to go and attest it, translate it, get it back, submit it to the court, and then it will be subject to the interpretation or the translation. Sometimes translations do not reflect whatever will you had in place.
So where could we get it translated and attested? By someone who knows how to translate legal documents, not just by a general translator?
Well, what I would say is make sure that whomever is doing it, there are lots of translation agencies. Whomever is doing it, you need to make sure that it reflects the spirit. It doesn't have to be a literal translation, because sometimes they don't make sense.
If you have bank accounts, right, upon that the bank account gets frozen, right, you're not able to access money. So a lot of people who say we have joint accounts, we are safe, they're actually not.
True.
The advice I got was to have a joint account, but also have a separate account for your spouse.
It could be, but another solution is when you go and open a bank account, a joint bank account, you sign an agreement. Pretty much you don't have a choice to change it, right? It's printed. But what you can do is ask the bank that if anything happens to either one of us, we would like the bank account to remain as is, not blocked. So if you put it in the agreement, your lawyer can easily submit it to the court and say they've agreed on the bank account. There are injunctions that you can, and motions you can apply for it. Take an example of a joint account. If I have a joint account with my wife, I pass away, then the account is frozen. Judges are not robots. They do understand that she needs to live off that account. So you can go and file a motion, and they will monitor the spending, and they will allow her to spend, but under their supervision. So a solution could be what was proposed to you, opening a different account, and another solution is basically in the agreement decide to leave it open if something happened to either one.
And I think a lot of people sort of say that we don't keep much in this country. I mean, I've lived there long enough. And some of the other things people are not thinking about are future proceeds, right? Insurance money. Where does that come in, right? Or if you have end of service benefit, which is accumulated by the employer and that gets paid out, where is the money going to be deposited? So I think people have a snapshot of what they have today. But there are
with employers, they don't have a choice. They will have to transfer it to your account, because they usually, when they open accounts and sign agreements, the bank will require them to make sure that they transfer the entitlements to that account. So whatever is transferred there will be blocked or frozen, as you said. it's an important issue, especially with joint accounts. But as I said, you can agree with the bank and sign agreement, and it could facilitate the process for you. Well, what happens is once a person passes away, because there are heirs, legal heirs, the estate of that person doesn't belong to anyone. It needs to be distributed to the legal heirs. So what the government or the banks do, they would be freezing these accounts to make sure that nothing will be spent illegally or not in accordance with the inheritance laws. And it happens a lot. Not in a non-local. In a local sense, when a father passes away and he has sons and daughters and children, sometimes they get into a fight regarding who's spending what. So this process is precautionary, and I think the central bank requires that. You need to freeze the bank account.
Then if something happens to me, does my executor need to come here to Qatar to make sure that everything goes smoothly there?
Let me go back to the attesting part. You will need to do it in Canada. And I think we don't have an embassy there. I think we have a consulate. We have an embassy actually in Canada. So you will need to go there and they will need to sign it and stamp it. Then you will have to send it to Qatar and they will do the same process. Your executor doesn't have to travel. He can appoint a lawyer to do that process. As long as the will gives him the power to manage that process, he can appoint a lawyer. Or he can travel into Qatar and take the process himself to the court. But the translation you can do in Canada, if they do translation. You don't have to do it not necessarily in Qatar.
And then what I have here in this country would go into my frozen bank account, and then how do those funds get released?
Once the court looks at the will and believes that this is what should be applied, then they will instruct the bank based on the executor wish to which account needs to be transferred and how they will do it, or the court would sell it for them, do an auction, or will allow him to take the car and sell it himself. So the process beyond the court, once the court is convinced, it's not a difficult process.
You've been talking about wills. Is there the concept of living wills? Something you're incapacitated, you're not dead, but you're incapacitated.
Yes,
you cannot make decisions on your behalf.
The same rules applies. Your home country law will apply on this case. If you didn't have a will, or if you didn't have specific instructions to deal with your belongings and yourself, what will happen is that they will look at your own laws and they will apply them. So if the laws, for example, in Qatar, if something goes wrong with me, my father is alive, so my father will be able to step in and take care, be the legal guardian. My wife will be the custodian, but my father will be the legal guardian to process whatever governmental applications they need. In terms of dual nationality, they will look at the last nationality. I mean, when you come to Qatar, you come on a visa. You cannot come with two nationality visa. It will be one passport that you will have your residency on. So it can be used as the official one to deal with this issue. As for who notifies the banks, your employers. They have a duty to report and transfer all of the entitlements to the bank account and inform them. Now, if somebody passes away in Qatar, basically they will take him to the hospital. The mortuary is in the hospital. They do in the system. It will be written down that XYZ passed away. This is their visa number. This is their nationality. So it will go on system, and it's a shared system with the government. So if somebody tries to go and do something on your behalf, they will be able to find it. They will see in the system the person passed away. I know that there are requirements, for example, under New York, that you have to follow to have a valid a valid will. What we would advise is, because most of the expats, they keep their assets at minimum in the country, what we advise them is just do a small will in Qatar and keep it in Qatar. You don't have to do it in Qatar and use it back home, because first of all, whomever is doing it in here, they might not understand the laws back home, unless you have somebody qualified in Qatar who can help you and take you through the process and create a valid will in Qatar and back home. We wouldn't advise doing that. Whatever you have in the country, we have a client who advised their employees, they're a foreign company, to keep ownership minimum. We don't think they should do that. You should, if people think investing in Qatar is good for them, they should do it. As long as they can, if they do that, they need to make sure that they have a will, valid will, that explains the process for whomever comes in to enforce that will, meaning the court system in Qatar.
Yeah, for a Muslim non-Qatari who is a resident in Qatar and who has written a will, if there are some of the parts of that will that conflicts with Sharia law, does the judge have the authority to step in and override the will? No,
actually what happens is, if your back home laws allows it, he does not have the power to overcome that. Your hometown laws will apply, no matter what, to what extent it's conflicting with Sharia law. Now, in Qatar, we have Sunnis and Shias. We have different followers of Islam, and each one has their own principles. The court does not apply the same principles to everybody. For sure, they have a norm for it. In Qatar, we have a specific court for Shias, for example. Non-Qataris, even Muslims, even Arabs, your hometown laws will apply. One thing, the concept of trust is not existence in the country. So you can do that. As long as you're alive, you can do whatever you want, the way you want it. You can create a trust. But we don't have a specific law dealing with that.
Is that true?
No, not necessarily. Now the trick with that is that if you don't have a will, and if you don't have heirs, based on which the state will be able to transfer your belongings to, the state will give your money to charity. There is no distinction between women and men in that regard.
If you pass away, how long is the surviving family allowed to stay in Qatar to deal with these matters?
They would allow you to, as long as they are resolved. Because the main issue is that all of these accounts, remember, the state doesn't want to take that responsibility. They don't want to have your money blocked. They don't want to have your car blocked, because it's a responsibility and a liability to them. So if somebody passes away, and we've seen that in a real life experience, they are very tolerant. They would allow them to come in and out as long as they need to resolve all of these issues.
Do I get return tickets back? Or
True.
Those sorts of things. So from the government's perspective, yeah, I can come and go, but I might need to be here to manage this stuff, but there's no resources. I have no housing, no income, no...
True. Well, let me give you a real life example. One of the oil and gas company had this issue. Well, first of all, the law forces the employer to cover the cost of repatriating the body back home. And as I said previously, in that process, you can file an injunction to the court and say, I'm living here, this is a joint account, and I need to spend from it, and they will allow you. They will communicate with the bank and allow you to do that. Now, in case of this oil and gas company, what they've done, usually employers in these situations, they are very cooperative. They've covered the cost. They paid all of the entitlements to the accounts. They made sure that the family is taken care of. What we advise people to do is, if you don't have business to be in Qatar, and probably most of people would love to go back to their home country, is appoint a lawyer and leave. He will take care of that process. Now, if you need to stay for example, schooling, if you have kids, usually employers cooperate with that. And if they didn't cooperate with that, there are so many places that you can go and file complaints based on which they will force them, one of which is the Human Rights Department, the Labor Department, and the Human Rights Committee. We've seen it. They force people to accept for a period of time. And if the sponsor doesn't want the responsibility, usually the state will say, fine, you sign a declaration and they live in the country, the state will be sort of responsible of you. We actually advise that. You can have a generic one in the US, including Qatar. But again, the part related to Qatar, try and do it locally, or translate your will back home, get it attested locally so it will help you in the process. Again, they are considered non-locals. If they are minors, by default, their country laws will apply. Whomever is the guardian as per that law will be able to take care of it. If they are past, based on your back home laws, if they are past certain age, will be considered no longer a minor, then that law will apply and he can have a will. So it's all about your back home laws and legislation and how it can be applied in Qatar. The only thing Qatar courts, the Qatari part will do is basically apply the requirements or imposition of your own laws. Well, the good thing about financial institutions and debt, it's personal under the law. So I'm not liable for my father's debt and he's not liable for my debt. They will be able to leave. They will be even able to repatriate the body. It has nothing to do with that. The only thing that usually banks require is employers to transfer the entitlements to that specific bank account they control, because that way they can deduct their own money and leave. The only step they can take if the money is not enough, file a claim in the court, and that's it. And he's passed away, so if the court issued a decision, they will need to look for the assets he owned, sell them, try and pay off the debt. Well, no, you keep a copy with you. The way we do it, we keep a copy with us as a law firm, copy with the relevant parties, as much copies as you want. And if you have an executor appointed, I would say give him a copy. The only thing we do is the Ministry of Justice will attest the will, just to give it credibility when it goes to court, and it cannot be challenged. Anything that needs to be submitted to the court or the governmental agencies needs to be in Arabic. It's the official language. They will ask you to translate into Arabic, and they will look at it. Now, in terms of death, the power of attorney terminates with the death, and there is no such thing in our legal system that a power of attorney could survive, even if you say that in the will. In terms of incapacity or medical issues, if you have a valid will, if it was done and specifies a person who should take care of you or manage your wealth, and your laws allow it back home, they will enforce it.
I don't know if I misunderstood you in the beginning, but I thought you said that if someone dies here without a will, they have to actually go home and get things attested and whatever before they can take the body.
No, the example I gave you is a real life example where a person passed away and his daughter wanted to repatriate his body back home, and because there is a car under his name, the Ministry of Interior did not allow them to repatriate the body. And I think they fixed this issue because the system didn't allow it. When you are passed away, your visa will be terminated, or residency. So once it's terminated, you have to sell any belonging before you leave the country.
Because we had two scenarios where were repatriated, but they didn't have to sell the car.
Yeah, so the one we resolved it, but I think because it's not in the law, it's a process that they follow. I think they fixed it. We haven't faced it after that. It was once. And because of that incident, we tried to come up with a system that will overcome any rules or policies that could be implemented in the future.
What happens if I'm in a coma? Is my husband able to make decisions on my behalf as to whether or not I'm intubated or are there just...
If he's in the country, yes. Now, if your laws does not allow him to do that and somebody comes and challenge it, he will have to show that he is the one, or what we call the legal guardian in this case. You asked me something about tax. There's no taxes in Qatar, so you shouldn't worry about that. Yes?
Going back to the bank account, if my wife has a bank account, she's under my sponsorship. So
Yes.
the bank account will still have my ID or my visa connected to that account. So if I pass away, is that account frozen as well?
No. When they open, as far as I understand, when they open an account in a bank under her name, your sponsorship is, or your residency is required because you are the sponsor, right? But it's personal. It's her account. They won't touch it.
So my husband's Qatari, I'm Canadian. Let's say he doesn't have a will.
Yes.
What happens to me?
Okay. Do you have kids? Do you have kids?
No.
Okay.
Let's say we have-
Well, let me explain to you.
Okay.
I'm assuming he's a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So am I.
Okay. He's a Qatari. Qatar law will apply. What happens? You're covered. You get a percentage that is already decided. If you have kids, if you have a son, a boy, he will block everybody else. His family will not be able to take a penny out of his wealth because he has a son. If it was a daughter, then his parents will be, there is a percentage that goes to the parents, his parents.
So could he do it in a way that he writes a will so that they're basically like it doesn't go along with Islamic law? Like, let's say he decides that he wants the children to have equal inheritance, regardless of sex.
The only way to do it is he gives away his nationality and have a different nationality. But what he can do is the 1/3 he has, he can actually devise 1/3 of his wealth. He can decide on a will saying that this 1/3 should go to the girls, for example. But see, being in Qatar, being a Qatari and a Muslim, you don't have a choice. It's already decided. And I think most of the Islamic countries or Arab countries, they have the same system.
You have a will for yourself, you have a will for your spouse, and then what happens if, like, is there a certain provision that you put in these wills in the event that both of you die at the same time?
Yes.
Do you need a third will?
Actually, a friend of mine did a will. He assumed that. He's a lawyer, so he assumed the worst. He said, we are in a car, we die, my son lives. What happens? He actually, both of them appointed the same people. Some people do a joint will, and they sign it together. He didn't do a joint will, but him and his wife, they had the same person being the executor, and they specified in case they both passed away.
I'm a legal resident of Virginia.
Yes.
I have a will in the state of Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, and then you said in order to have it legalized, it has to be translated and legislation stating who who will inherit me is stated in the legislation there.
Yeah.
I have a son.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be, and I'm a Muslim, would it be easier just to say that I want Sharia law to apply and everything will go to him anyway?
Could be.
Instead of...
If you want, you can. But the problem is, if you decide that Qatar law will apply, it doesn't apply in the US. So whatever you have in the US.
Yeah, but that's,
So
a separate will for the US. instead
Yeah,
of?
you can do that. You can do that. It shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
It shouldn't be a problem.